Thank you for joining us and welcome to Walkaway Thought Leaders Presents America Burning, Race, Rioting, and Police Brutality. We decided to have this conversation because we thought that it was well overdue and necessary to have an open and honest dialogue. Again, thank you for joining us. On the panel today, we have Janelle King, the co-founder of Speak Georgia. We have Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, former member of the U.S. House of Representatives and a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. Sergeant Brown, former military and a current federal law enforcement officer. Katie Hopkins, who says she's much prettier in person, an English media personality, columnist, and social critic. We have Chandler Crump, who is a 15-year-old free-thinking public speaker, activist, and content creator. Tyrus, a comedian and Fox News contributor. We have Kelly Ann, who is a former cop in a large Midwestern metro area. And lastly, we have Brandon Straka, who is the founder of the Walkaway campaign. I am Shamika Michelle, your moderator for today's discussion. Again, thank you for joining us, and we thank Walkaway for putting this on. Hello, everyone.
Hello, greetings.
Hello.
What's going on?
So before we start this discussion, especially since we are talking about race, I want us to have some boundaries or some definitions about what or who exactly we're talking about. When we talk about people of color, we have a lot of Black people who are offended that everybody's lumped in together. So I want us to just kind of decide who we're talking about. Are we talking about American descendants of slaves? Or are we talking about everyone who has just recently started to be included? Because what we're seeing right now seems to be an issue between white people and American descendants of slaves. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page with that going forward, that this is what this discussion is going to be about when we talk about people of color. Now, if you want to make another reference at times, that's fine. I just want to make sure we have that understanding prior to moving forward. Are we good on that?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Good. Okay, great. So let's talk about justice for George Floyd. That's what is kind of happened. That's why we're here today. What exactly does that mean? I'm going to ask that question to Lieutenant Colonel Alan West initially, and then others can join in. What is justice for George Floyd?
I think justice for George Floyd is to make sure that the officers that are responsible for his death, the one officer that had his knee on his carotid artery for more than 6 minutes, and the 3 other officers are properly charged, they are properly tried, and if so, go through that judicial process, they are sentenced, convicted and sentenced. And I think that when you look at the background of those 4 officers, the first question that I have to ask, with some 19 different complaints against them, why were they still there on the street? So I believe that we should be focusing on that process there in the city of Minneapolis. We should be asking the police chief there some very tough questions. We should be asking the city district attorney some very tough questions. And then also asking the Attorney General of Minnesota some tough questions as far as the prosecution that he's going to be bringing forth. But I think that you lose the moral high ground. I live now down here in Dallas, Texas. I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. When you see people that are, suffering from violence as far as, cars or businesses being attacked, we need to focus on right there in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and making sure that justice is being properly adhered to for George Floyd in this case.
Thank you. Janelle, I'm sure you have your ear to the streets as a TV host. Do you think that crowded streets or what's going on now would make real racists think twice?
So, you know what? This is the thing. I think we do have to consider what is the purpose of our protests, right? And I think sometimes we lose sight of what it was and what it meant during Dr. King days, because we typically reference that. Because when we were protesting during the time of Dr. Martin Luther King, we also have to understand that when these boycotts were going on and when these things were happening, it didn't happen overnight. So if we're not prepared to be consistent and to stay in the game for a really long time, and then that's not going to happen. And when what we're looking for is not going to occur. But I do think that I do find it a little odd. So I guess I'll be the one to kind of kick this off. But a little odd that we immediately went to demonstrations. The reason why I say that is because I can't think of anyone who was against the murder of George Floyd. I felt like just about everyone who I talked to, and I can't even say just about everyone who I talked to, agree that the cop that killed George Floyd, along with those who stood by or who are accomplices to the murder, should be charged. So I think that when we moved into the whole protesting piece, I'm not quite sure what was the original intent of it. I don't know if it was just a natural progression because as African Americans, we automatically assume to be that we won't get justice. But I know we can go further into that later on in the discussion. But I do think that unity is on our side this time.
Tyrus, you said something earlier about history. In reference to what Janelle was just saying, do you have a comment about that?
Yeah, she makes a good point, but unfortunately, the George Floyd situation is a song we've heard way too many times with the same ending. And the fact that the politicians in Minnesota didn't have the foresight to realize what was going to kick off when this happened. The rest didn't come immediately. The rest didn't come quickly. So it was very quick for everyone to be like, here we go again. Here's another situation where we have so much evidence. Men have been arrested for less. And it also goes against every statement as a Black man and myself, anytime I've talked to my children, to my friends, when you get pulled over with the police, whether you agree with why you're being pulled over or stopped, you cooperate, you comply, so you go home alive. And in this case, that didn't matter. There was no sign that he did anything but comply, and he was still murdered in cold blood in broad daylight in front of everyone. So the fact that those indictments didn't come down, that those arrests didn't come down, is what tipped this all off. That's what got this started. People went right to, here we go again. This will not, and also at the same time, look at the reason. We've been locked up for the COVID pandemic. We got 40 million people out of work. Some of those jobs are not coming back.
Yep.
Like we have a divided country. We have politicians who are playing with everyone's heartstrings, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, whatever. Everyone's playing their side of the street. The other side is the enemy. There's a lot of things going on. And on top of that, you witnessed probably the most ruthless murder that we have seen by law enforcement with a camera on it. In my time, I've never seen anything like that. You've seen other videos before, but there was always that argument about he was resisting arrest. You don't know what happened before the camera. There was a fight. The officer was afraid for his life. There was all these things that would cause doubt or speculation. This situation was literally, what? How do you explain this other than arrest all four of them? And that's the issue. That's what led to the immediate protest. That's what led to the outrage, because it was shocking, because that to your point, nobody disagreed. Nobody was like, well, I have to see all the evidence. Everyone was like, what? Why did this happen? And yet the arrest didn't come because the politicians and the AG didn't have the foresight to realize that what they were dealing with was a powder keg, and they handled it miserably. And real quick, the first job of a politician is supposed to be secure and protect the property and the lives of the people that they govern over. And they didn't do that.
Katie, as someone on the outside of America, kind of looking in, but very heavily involved with politics, do you think protest, peaceful or otherwise, is bringing real change?
I think it's one of the things we've seen today in the UK. People have been antagonizing for protests, violent protests of our own. We just had a police officer punched in the face and riots taking place. I think it's going to get more dramatic towards this weekend when more protests are planned. And I guess my question as an outsider is, yes, okay, but when does this end? When does it stop? So you mentioned that people were unified in the fact that those police officers should be arrested, they should be charged, and then they should be found however they're found. Now they have been arrested. Now one is going to be charged. My question is, when does it stop? And my sense is that it doesn't stop. My sense from time in South Africa, which is now down to 5% whites, most South Africans now, white South Africans, no longer live in South Africa. My sense is that it doesn't stop, that this is really revenge for the past, and the revenge for the past has no end. And as I know in my country, where I will be a minority white by 2030, where does it end for white people? Does it end when we have Black economic empowerment? Does it end when white people are no longer allowed to get the jobs first? Does it end when businesses have to be Black majority owned? That's true in South Africa. So I guess my question back to the panel is, when does it stop? Because I don't believe these people know why they're on the streets anymore. And I don't think there's any end point. And I think the honest answer about why America is on fire is actually revenge.
I think that is a great question to ask back to the panelists. I was speaking to a friend who was talking about Colin Kaepernick and how when he was kneeling, he was ridiculed for just kneeling, which was a simple protest. And then Martin Luther King III actually tweeted that his father explained that riots are the language of the unheard. So is there a thought, and I'm going to ask this first to Brandon, is there a thought you believe in the Black community that we aren't being heard? And how do you see that as, a white man in America?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Obviously, I won't say obviously, I very much think that the messaging that I seem to be receiving from the Black community is that they feel that they are not being heard. One of the biggest problems that I have as a white person in this discourse is that I'm constantly being told that we as white people can't possibly understand what Black Americans go through. We can't possibly know or understand the experience. And many times when I'll ask the question, please articulate, please tell me, because I'm not seeing it. Now, please don't mistake that. I see racial injustice at times. I see racism at times. I certainly don't see all of it. I certainly don't experience all of it. But I have a very difficult time believing that the experience that Black people are going through in this country is so horrific and so unbelievable that it can't even be articulated in words. And this is what I'm hearing time and again. And so we look at what happened just now with George Floyd being killed. Now, I want to point out the fact that it's not as though the officers were not charged. It seems that what the objection was that they weren't charged fast enough. And that indicates to me that we're not really paying much attention now or putting much emphasis on collecting evidence, hearing the entirety of the case. Yes, I understand that we had a videotape, and I understand that that video was incredibly disturbing. It disturbed me too. But there are other factors in a criminal investigation that have to be sorted through before we can press charges. Why are we burning the country down? Because those officers didn't get charged fast enough. And I think that boils down to a lot of people saying, well, this is another example of, what you not being able to understand what it's like to be a Black person. Perhaps. But number one, can you please explain and articulate that to me? And if you cannot, let's not burn the country down because we're simply following due process like we would in any investigation. The officers were charged, but we shouldn't, the hair trigger response should not be a Black person was killed. Let's go out and get these cops and burn them at the stake immediately. Let's follow due protocol when conducting investigation.
Sergeant Brown, is there a problem with police brutality?
Yes, I would say that. The issue is this. I always use this word accountability when it comes to law enforcement. I've been in the field for the last 16 years. And we live by this code that everyone knows is the thin blue line. The thin blue line is this underlying code that we don't snitch on each other, which is BS. We need to start holding each other accountable. And the problem is this. It's a lot deeper than Mr. Floyd, what happened with him. The problem is systemically. If you go back in the history of this country, let's just be honest here. The relationships between police officers in the history of this country and minorities, especially Blacks, has never been good. We can go back to the 60s during the riots. We can you can turn on your YouTube channel seeing dogs and water hoses being sicked on blacks and minorities in this country. You can go to the Rodney King. I mean, myself as a black man, when I'm pulled over, no matter what I've done for this country, as a Marine, as a federal law enforcement officer, the first thing I'm seeing is my skin color. Officers come up to approach the vehicle, my windows are down, my hands are on the 3 o'clock, the 9 o'clock position, and I'm officer. First of all, if I'm an off-duty police officer, I have a firearm in my car. What do you want me to do? And some of these officers, unfortunately, they are white. They're you can tell they're already on cloud 20,000. And I'm like, calm down. Then they go, oh, you're a police officer. I see it comes out. So the problem is this. It's the system itself. It's not just individuals. The system itself has built to oppress minorities in this country. The judicial system itself is the oppressor. So we need to start doing is having open dialogue, conversations like what I do on my job. I talk to my colleagues. I explain to them what it is to be a black man that walks down the street, to be looked at, to get on the elevator and a lady clenches her purse, to go into a Denny's when I was an active duty Marine here and not be served in Texas because of the color of my skin. I've been through all of that. So I get to relate to both sides. When I'm in uniform, it's different. I'm not a threat. But once I take that uniform off, I'm just like every other black man in this country. So we need to start having these open dialogues, being honest about race in this country. And in the police departments, we need to start having more training, vetting these officers before they come on, start hiring from within the community. How can you take a white guy that's never been around black people from Nebraska and you put him into the black neighborhood in Southeast DC, expect him to relate? Of course he's going to be scared. So we need to tear it down, rebuild it from within, and start having these open, honest dialogue and having conversations and providing real training for officers to acknowledge these things.
Kellyanne, with that being said, as a former police officer, do you believe that Black people are unfairly profiled and targeted?
Sure. I think there's some to an extent of that. So, there's a piece that Katie's talking about when she talks about revenge. There is a piece that Brandon talks about, when he's bringing into the conversation, what is it that we're missing, right? There's a piece that Sergeant Brown's talking about where he's saying there's kind of this heightened sense of fear. Here's what's going on here. I'm with the conservatives when they say this is not a problem and this is not an epidemic. We have to look at everything by the numbers. You guys have heard this. I've been watching every single news station for, the last few days, just like everybody else has. I watch MSNBC, who in an hour's time period has 6 guests on TV that say over and over again, this is a problem. It happens over and over and over and over again. And they never push back on any of the guests who say that. They agree and say, yes, 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 it does. With the exception of a few folks that have been on Fox News, I haven't seen one of those people in media turn around and look at these guests and say, but is it? And tell me where unjustified police killings are a problem. I need you to show me the data. Well, here's what it is. 2019, the federal crime stats just came out. In 2019, there were 9 unarmed Black men killed by police. The first thing that we have to do is say, and Sarge, you'll back me up on this, you don't have to be unarmed for me to justify lethal force, as was with Michael Brown's case. But the media took that and ran with it and just completely exploded the narrative. And we still have people out there thinking Michael Brown was just a kid walking down the street, leaving a store. No, he attacked the cop and tried to pull his gun, right? But if I give you a head start, because I'm nice, if I give you a head start and say, I'm going to assume all 9 of those were unjustified. By the way, there were 19 white men killed last year, unarmed ones by cops in this country. If I give you the head start and I look at how many law enforcement officers are around, right? In the United States, 850,000 sworn at all levels of government. That means I have a problem with 0.00001% of the cops in this country. Is this worth burning down America for? Now, that said, this is where I dissent from the conservatives. This is where I break away from the conservatives, because then they come in and say, well, there's no such thing as systematic racism. Well, Sergeant, I can tell you, we've absolutely seen it. So, and it's not coming from our, our communities, our Black communities, and it's not coming from our police officers. It's coming from the bureaucrats over them controlling the money, right? That's what's happening. We've got the wrong focus. What we have is we've got a group of people who are still, like Katie said, dealing with some sins of the past. That emotion has transferred from the grandfather who had the experience with the police, who could not drink out of the same water fountain that I could. And the police were used by the government to enforce that and empowered to do so by any means possible. He has the emotion from that spirit experience, and we've got to honor that. He passed that down to his, kids. He passed it down to his grandkids. So they're heightened by police, rightfully so. You have police officers who know their sins of the past for the guys that went before them who wore that uniform, right? That they're trying now to break down this bias and say, oh my gosh, there's people who just don't understand police work, and they've got people viewing them. So you've got two groups of people who are really good people. I mean, are there bad cops? Absolutely. There's librarians who steal books. But you've got these two groups of people now who have so much emotion that they've transferred. And when they come together, it's just a powder keg. And who's done it is everybody who wants an agenda. It's our media, it's our government, it's liberal bureaucrats that have promised them things and never delivered. It's in every liberal city. So we've got problems with both sets, and it's not them. They're innocent. Bullies pick on the vulnerable.
So with what you were just saying, as far as the amount of unarmed Black men that were killed by police last year, and when you were talking about you don't have to be unarmed to be aggressive or to be, to make the police feel like they're in fear, I want to ask you what constitutes resisting arrest, or what exactly, because when I look at Tyrus, I see a large Black man. If I was the police, I would probably approach him with my finger on the trigger. What exactly, what do we do in these?
It's true.
Yeah. Well, it is.
Hey, but Bruce Lee was only 125 pounds now. Let's remember that.
Yeah, but word on the street is he might have embellished some of his fights a little bit.
Oh, man.
So Tyrus, are you fearful of police at all?
I have been, in my lifetime, I've been pulled over by the police or stopped by the police 4 times. 5 of those ended up being roughed up, had a gun to my head, was kicked in the groin, was zip tied on the ground with a boot on my face, all for just being Black in a lowrider car. So there is always a feeling of, oh shit, when I get pulled over.
Yeah.
There's always a feeling of, I have to remember to keep my wits about me. Now, as I've grown wiser and older and able to bottle up my anger, my goal is to go home. I know I don't have a warrant. I know I haven't committed a crime. But if I have a suspended driver's license, I'm thinking, what's the worst thing that's going to happen to me? I'll spend the night in jail, or I'll have to walk home from my car. I'm going to cooperate and comply with everything. Now, the brother in the beginning talked about his hands on the steering wheel. Mine are out the window. I asked to do everything. I asked to scratch my nose. Officer, may I please get my driver's license, which is in my glove? May I please open it? I'm going to open it with my right hand now. I'm going to take my left hand. That's why I talk, because I've been conditioned. Real quick, and I'm going to get into things. One of the examples I heard in this debate was I brought up South Africa, and that was a Black country that was occupied by aggressive white people who brought in apartheid. So eventually, as things get right, the population should be 5%, because there was no percent in the beginning. So, and if they're having a tough time over there, it was a Black country and should have remained a Black country. When you talk about revenge and things like that, unfortunately, Black America, we are not united like that. We don't even have roots connected unless we do deep scientific research to know where we come from. We're all from different tribes, places. We've all been intermixed breed. So we are not It's not like we're going to do something when you talk about revenge. And the other thing, I know you like to bring up statistics, but all 5 of my abuses, all 5 of my beat downs or being tased for no reason at all, I never reported them. Most brothers don't report. Report to who? You're going to go into the precinct and said your cop roughed me up on a Friday night? You're not. They don't record that. And that's me. 5 of the 20 experiences I've had were really bad. Now, I had other ones, I had great officers and was fine. But those 5 experiences, I didn't report anything. I mean, we're not reporting. Brothers don't report. We don't. Families don't report. Because who are we going to report to? Them? You know, here's a perfect example. The one cop had 18 sites of complaints against him. What do those 18 do? Nothing. And that's the problem. We don't trust as an entire group, as a culture. It has been instilled culturally not to trust the police. They are used to suppress and keep you down. That is what has been educated, especially men. And it's even worse for Black women, because Black women are even in a tougher situation, because a lot of times, unfortunately, dealing with domestic violence, dealing with just trying to grow up in rough neighborhoods and things like that, they should be able to rely on law enforcement when they're in trouble. But they're afraid to do that because even the repercussions for afterwards for going to the police. Like literally, it is a thing, stitches before stitches, you know what I'm saying? And then the police have the same code. They won't tell on each other. We won't tell on each other. It's bigger than numbers because one side doesn't report.
I was gonna, in reference to what you were saying, and you just said Black women have it worse. I've always been told that I don't understand as a Black woman because I've never been in fear of being stopped by the police. I see it happen. And I've just always felt, I don't know if it's my smile or because I'm cute. I just always, you know, anytime I've been stopped by the police, I've never been in fear. And so I've tried to ask this question and get an understanding from Black men. And I want to ask Chandler, as a young Black man in America, with everything that you have a chance of seeing now, social media is right at your fingertips, and you see this stuff constantly played over and over and over again. You know, you'll be having your license soon, you'll be driving. Are you in fear as a young Black man, you know, with what you see every day, all day?
I would say that I am in fear of a lot of things, but it's not specifically, you know, police and that one specific thing or only that. There's a lot of things that scare me about being out in the open world, like say driving. Driving is a very dangerous thing to do. In terms of police, however, though, I know that like Tyra said, and I believe like somebody else said, keeping your wits about you and being as respectful as possible is important. Now, I know there are some very small cases and situations in which even doing all that would still end up with you on the ground. But I know for a fact that times have changed. Since 2011 or 2012, we've been way more outspoken about all the issues in terms of police brutality, Black Lives Matter, and all these sorts of things. And so now, whenever I speak to a police officer or I see a police officer, I always know that they are always having it on their mind to be as respectful and careful as possible. I also know that the culture of not telling on other police officers, I feel as if that's fading, because now with social media culture and, you know, always being able to record something and it being all over the internet, it's not even worth keeping a secret anymore, because like these other 4 cops that are now being charged with aiding and abetting that crime, even if they hadn't had a chance to keep it to themselves, they're now involved with it and they're now getting charged with this because they were recorded. And so I believe that with the modernization of our country and the digitalization of all these effects and all these situations with everybody having a smartphone and social media making us more connected than ever before, I feel as if it's more a time to take a step outside and not feel in fear, but feel like it's time to live your life and not look at what somebody is, whether they're wearing a blue, you know, dress uniform or wearing just normal civilian clothes, to treat them with respect and be as careful as possible and take everything into account when I'm living my life. So I would say that there is fear, but it's not fear specifically about, you know, what they look like or what they can do, but just who they are in general. So I'll analyze somebody's personality and get my fear from that rather than just because they're a police officer. I have a lot of respect for police officers, and I hope with, you know, the changing of the age that will grow.
And I hope that, oh, sorry. I was going to say real quick that I hope that young man life experience stays that way, because I can remember being that age and thinking, well, I'm not a criminal, so I don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah.
You know,
I completely
and
understand
his youthful exuberance is great, and I wish, young man, that you'll be able to stay that way. And that's a great thing you're saying, and that's how your mind should be until you are shown otherwise. So don't let anyone. My experience was different, but at one point, I was a young brother like you who thought the same way. So hopefully you don't have that experience.
Lieutenant Colonel, as one of the more seasoned panelists here,
that's a way of calling me old. Okay.
Well, you said it earlier. I was trying to fix it up a little bit because but your experience, I feel like when you've been around a little longer, you have that wisdom that you can really impart. What do you think about, the thought of police brutality and what's happening in America? Are you in fear being a Black man?
No, I'm not in fear in being a Black man, an American Black man. Let me give you a little bit about my history. I know there are a couple of the panelists here that are from my hometown of Atlanta, Georgia. I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, when Hugh Spalding Hospital was a Blacks only hospital in 1961. I grew up in the old Fourth Ward neighborhood. It was the same neighborhood Dr. Martin Luther King grew up in as well and preached in. My elementary school, Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic School, was right across the street from Ebenezer Baptist Church. My dad grew up in South Georgia, and he went off to fight for this country in World War II. And he came back, and at the age of 15, he challenged me to be the first officer in the family. He said that there's no greater honor than to serve this country in uniform. My older brother was an infantryman in Vietnam, Marine Corps. And when he came back, he was an Atlanta police officer and rose up to become a detective there. I think that when we talk about the issue of why is America on fire, there are two systemic things that are happening. One of the systemic things that are happening in the United States of America is that we have an irrational emotionalism that, as Kellyanne kind of alluded to, is fueled by media, is fueled by politicians who want to have control over people. And that is causing us to not be as rational. That is not causing us to not be as critical thinking and thought-provoking as we should. Now, that does not mean that we don't respond when we see injustice, but we don't go out and take the kind of courses of action that we see happening right now in the United States of America. And then the other systemic thing that I will talk to you about is the decimation of the American Black community itself from what I remember growing up, where you had 77% two-parent households back in 1961 when I grew up. Now it's 24%. When you had good, strong education opportunities in those schools, when you had a respect within those communities, when you had small business entrepreneurship. I remember Auburn Avenue growing up and seeing the doctor's offices and lawyers' offices and all of these things. I remember, the leaders that we had. Maynard Jackson, what an incredible mayor that we had that transformed America. He was not Black, he was not white, he was a mayor, he was a leader. The same with Andrew Johnson, who came in also, who was a former UN secretary. So I think that that's what we need to start looking at, is how do we restore these things that were, once strong in the American Black community. And we've got to get rid of this irrational emotionalism, because I see the American people just getting played. Yep. They're getting played by both political parties. And yeah, I was a Republican member of Congress because I'm a conservative, and that pretty much so close as a line. But everyone knows the Republicans redistricted me out of my own congressional district because I stood up on principles and values. And that is the greatest fear that politicians have in the United States of America. If people will stand up on their convictions, their principles and values, and not fall into this trap being promulgated and proliferated from either side, then we will not see our country being on fire. Then we will not be put up against each other. And as Katie talked about, we won't have this revenge mentality when people are going out and trying to keep us as slaves and say that you need to, get a check from someone. I don't need a check. All I needed was someone to look at me and give me the equality of opportunity, not the quality of outcomes. And until we get to those systemic problems that we have in America, the irrational and emotionalism being driven to anger by the 24/7 media cycle, and then the decimation of those urban inner city communities, which I've seen happen in my 60 years of life, we're going to continue down this path unless we turn it around in those areas.
Brandon?
Shamika, sorry, if I may quickly, I had a question based off of some of the comments that Sergeant Brown made and Tyrus. My question is, if you look at the situation realistically, Sergeant Brown, I believe, I don't remember your exact words, but I think that you've made the comment about, being concerned about being profiled. Tyrus, you told us about your experience. Sometimes to me, as a white person, I listen to the stories that I hear coming from Black Americans, and I wonder if there is the proper perspective. To be honest with you, Sergeant Brown, you are built like a brick house. Tyrus, you are a very intimidating looking man. It has nothing to do with the color of your skin. If both of you were white people with the build that you have, I would feel
I'd like to know. I'd like to know.
That's not fair.
You're recovering, Lieutenant.
Colonel's Jack too. Colonel's Jack too, man.
Yes. But my point is that, does perspective ever come into this where you ask yourself, does it have to do with other factors besides the color of my skin? I mean, another example I might use is that there are a lot of Black American people who say, well, we can't even shop in a store without being followed around. I find it hard to believe that someone like Janelle can't go shopping in a store without somebody thinking that she's sticking things into her bag. But look at the way that Janelle presents herself. There are white people in this world too who have tattoos on their faces, who are wearing their pants hanging down, who look like they probably are a little strung out on something. And I guarantee you those people are getting followed around when they walk into a store. Why? Because the vibe that they're getting off is something that seems a little bit shady. So I guess my question to some of you is, does that enter into your questioning at all, that maybe it's not the color of my skin, but the fact that I am a gigantic, strong, intimidating looking man?
And let me just add to that before you answer, Sergeant Brown. Brandon, I agree. He is built like a brick house. I didn't know if it was this blazer or what, but I was feeling a little warm. I wasn't going to.
Girl.
Sergeant, go ahead.
Who's speaking?
It's your turn. Answer Brandon.
Okay. Oh, yes. So that's a valid question that Brandon asked. But I would say this: I haven't always been built this way. When I first went to the military, I was 135 pounds. So I grew up in a small town in Southern Virginia, very small town. I can remember it back in my high school days. I remember us being, teenage kids. They congregate together. They park their cars, they get out, they laugh, they joke. And I remember the town police coming up to us going, look, you guys need to clear this parking lot. And we go, well, wait a minute. Well, what about the white kids across the street? Don't worry about them. You guys need to leave this parking lot. 15 minutes later, I drive back through. I see them over there outside the cars talking, conversing with the white kids. So I'm looking like, well, what's the problem? We're not doing anything. We're teenagers just like those. I remember I mentioned being discriminated against in Denny's. At the time, my wife at the time, she was a staff NCO in the Marine Corps. I was a non-commissioned officer in the Marine Corps. We were driving from Camp Pendleton to Quantico, Virginia. We were moving. Sea bags packed on top of the car. I mean, Colonel, the sea bag drag. You know how it goes.
I know it.
Yes. So we stopped. I had two small children in the back seat. My daughters had been hungry. So we go, okay, Denny's. I said, I'm on a time schedule. Another hour, we'll stop. I stop at the Denny's. We walk inside. We stand there 15, 20 minutes. No one addresses us. So my wife at the time she's Dominican, she's Spanish, but you didn't know she looks white. So she's getting irate. She's from Patterson, New Jersey. She got that Latino spicy thing inside of her. So she goes, I need to speak with a manager. Babe, just be calm. So finally, I said, ma'am, can we be seated? Yes, come on. She takes us, she seats us. No one came in to offer us water. No one came in to offer us a menu. And I go, you know what? Let's just leave. They didn't want to acknowledge us. So we leave. I got two small children in the back seat crying because they're hungry. As a Black man that's serving this country, as an active duty Marine and my wife, we could get deployed tomorrow and be killed in combat to die for this country. So I had this conversation with another Marine, happened to be a white guy. And he told me, he goes, you know what? If you'd have wore your uniform, you'd have been served. Why do I have to constantly prove that I'm American enough for you to accept me? That's how I feel as a Black man in this country. No matter what I've done for this country, I've been serving this country for over 20 years, and I'm still not good enough. So when you ask that question, we all have prejudices inside of us, but we have to acknowledge that and we have to suppress it. I'm not going to lie. if I'm somewhere in an impoverished neighborhood, I see 4 brothers walk up with a hood over their head, I'm probably looking like, oh. If I see a white man walk across the street with tattoos all over the place and he's bald headed, I'm like, the guy looks like a Nazi. But we have to acknowledge that, be honest with each other, and try to suppress it. So wait a minute. Maybe he like wearing his hair bald, he like tattoos. Maybe these guys are cold, they got hoods over their head. So to answer that question, I think we need to have this, we need to start having an open, honest dialogue. Be honest with our feelings. Talk about it. That way, when those things arise, we know how to suppress it in knowledge, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't want to diminish your experience. But what if they were just lousy service, just provided lousy service? Yeah. I've had the exact same experience you're describing.
We could ask
many times.
What ifs.
But you know, Brandon.
Good call, Brandon.
Let me ask that question, please. So, Brandon, you know, we're standing there at the table, and I have 4 white couples come in, and they're seated after us, and we're the only black people within maybe an hour and a half of sight. Pretty sure it probably got something to do with the skin color.
And it may have. It may have.
Yeah, and I definitely think it exists. It even exists within just the Black community. When we talk about, I'm a dark-skinned Black woman.
I'm light-skinned, so I know. Yeah.
You know, for not being light enough. So we know that there is discrimination based on skin color.
Yeah. If I could point something out, because I was raised in that question, you're kind of telling on yourself a little bit, bruh. Your question itself was part of the problem. You immediately went to, well, if I see a guy with tattoos and baggy pants, I think something's wrong with him. Well, that's your preconceived notion of what's based off what you think is okay. And wherever you learn that from is part of the problem. Just because somebody dresses, I have hand tattoos. I have tattoos all over me from my life experiences. And when I was assaulted or when I was pulled over by the police, they didn't call me by my first name. They called me boy, or they called me nigger, or they said, what kind of hybrid are you? Why are your eyes that color? They're not polite. They let you know exactly what you are, because that's the point. You don't belong here. Why are you in my neighborhood? That you know immediately the moment you get pulled over. You're coming from a place because you never experienced that. Maybe if you went to a Black restaurant one time and you sat down and nobody served you, and you would feel that uncomfortableness in your stomach going, what the hell? Why?
But you're making an assumption right now.
You do something, they say you're out. Based off the question that you asked, you sound like a pompous person who is coming from a place of arrogance. Your life experiences, you haven't experienced that. So couldn't there have been something else? That's the part of the problem. You always want to make it something else. The honesty is it's not. It's exactly what it is. He wasn't killed because he was Black.
Well, Tyrus, listen, Tyrus, I'm not going to personalize the comment that you just made about the assumption about who I am, but I will say one thing that really bothers me about what you're saying is that, and it bothers me about this culture in general, is I feel like political correctness is now discouraging people from being able to even realize their own instincts. What are we telling women right now? Women aren't allowed to feel afraid or feel intimidated if a gigantic man walks by them in an alley and he happens to be a Black man. It's not, now they have to be, they have to ask themselves, should I protect myself or will I be considered a racist?
Shouldn't it be the guy in the suit? Because statistically, it's the creepy guy in the suit that's doing all the stuff.
I think that every individual should have the right. I think that every individual should have the right to listen to their own instincts if they feel that they are unsafe. Now, some people's instincts are not good. Some people have racist instincts, but I don't think that that's the majority. But I don't think that it's helpful to tell people things like, oh, well, you know, there's something wrong with you or wrong with your thinking if you look at somebody who has an intimidating presence and you act on that and take whatever measures you need to take to feel safe.
Yep. But let me come in here as, you know, again, as the seasoned guy, and I want to hear what Chandler has to say.
Yeah.
You have an entertainment industry that has portrayed a certain group of people in a certain way. And they've done that consistently over and over. Look, I grew up, you had Shaft, Superfly, the original Shaft and Superfly, and that was fine. But when you look at some of the things that are on TV today, and I would say that in many ways, the American Black community has allowed that to happen. But we are being portrayed in a certain way that goes out there in a media blast that causes people to look at Black men in that way. You know, I get it. I mean, think about what Joe Biden said about Barack Obama. He's articulate. He's clean. He's intelligent. Like that was some anomaly. That should not be happening. And so my question to Chandler is, young man, what do you see in the future? Because here you are, 45 years behind me. You're growing up in the same city that I grew up in. What do you see as your future growing up in America?
Well, like you were talking about how, the TV shows and other various things that are directly related to Black popular culture are promoting certain things. And so the idea of the Black male. So you hear my voice. I will admit, I don't sound like what you or what a lot of Black people would assume a Black male would sound like. If somebody comes up to me, hey, why are you talking white? You're not Black enough if you talk that way. And I'm like, I talk this way because this is the way I talk. I read a lot of books. I've lived a life, not as long as a life as any of you guys, but I've lived a life. I have a good education, which is not the response I want to give, because it just seems so. It's what they'd assume I'd say. Every time I speak the way I speak, somebody says, "Oh, look at him. He's being arrogant. He thinks he's better than us." This is just the way I am, and that's because Black culture has been manipulated to see us as intellectually inferior and emotionally unstable in comparison to every other race. And we're being cultivated from the very beginning, from the womb, if you aren't torn apart before you're born, from the womb to act in a certain way and to go about your life not really doing anything because you see yourself as a victim within the culture. And there are some cases, of course, where it is institutionalized, especially in the 60s, 70s, and maybe even 80s, and possibly even the 90s, where there is issues directly related to race, like Sergeant Brad was mentioning. But now, in the year 2020, when most of these racial issues are as small as they could ever be, the media, social media, mass media is still pushing this same narrative that Black people are perpetual victims, that we cannot accomplish anything. And that if you're speaking this way, or if you support the president, or you're like, oh, maybe Democrats might be a little bit racist, or, I'm thinking this specific way, you can't do that. That makes you not Black anymore, because they're trying to box in together the idea of what a Black person should be. And I guess that's what I'm looking forward, or what I'm looking at. I think my generation is finally going to change that, but I've experienced this from people in my generation as well. So that's why I'm fighting, because I don't want my generation's Black culture to be the same as every other generation's Black culture in terms of what the media is doing to us. So I think that's what I have to say.
Can I jump in here for
just one moment? I'm sorry. And we're going to give everybody a chance, but I want to put this question out here. Katie, you tweeted George Floyd's criminal record. Can you explain your reasoning and relevance for doing that? And does it matter to you that it comes across to some as justification?
Sure, thank you. I think, importantly, and I think Chandler's doing a terrific job. And I think anybody that puts you down for the way you talk or the way your voice sounds, you stand up and say, this is me, this is who I am.
Thank you, Katie.
I think part of what the problem is, actually, it's very easy to blame the media. It's like blaming white people or the monster over there.
True.
I think actually Black people have to own a lot of these issues. Number one, the people saying to you, you don't talk right, you don't talk like a Black guy, you're not Black enough, and I hate to think of some other things you've been called, all hideous. But that's been done to you by other Black individuals. They need to be better. And you speak about people who are victims. Bullies always pick on the weakest, Kellyanne. The rioters, the looters, I appreciate some of them, the anarchist, white anarchist, Antifa, but Black people are also looting, are also rioting. They have taken the George Floyd hashtag and they've used it as an excuse to commit criminal activity. That doesn't help Black people be perceived as the sort of people that are trustworthy in our society. I'm not leveling that at anyone in particular. I'm leveling it directly at the people who are rioting and looting and the hideous white people who are amongst them trying to egg them on. I published George Floyd's criminal record because sometimes all of us, all colors, are guilty of taking someone we champion as someone we can use to crusade behind and turning them into a bit of a Jesus figure. My sense, if we revert to where Brandon and others were earlier, is if we don't know all the facts of the matter, where are we? So you could level, Shamika, at Al Jazeera. Why did they call George Floyd a gentle giant and a family man, when in fact he had a long criminal record and was on drugs allegedly at the time of his death? And as for you, Tyrus, your insulting comment that white have no place in South Africa, that it's just as well they're down to 5%, that it was black land and so it should be only black land only. Is that how you feel about Australia as well? You want the whites hunted out of Australia, Tyrus? Is that how you feel about New Zealand as well, Tyrus? That the whites should be hunted out because when they arrived in 1652, they shouldn't have been there and every white family since should pay the price? You, Tyrus, I would level this straight at you, are actually part of the problem. You think revenge is
Are you gonna post my criminal record now because you don't agree with me?
You're not listening, Tyrus.
You're gonna post my. I stopped listening when you started making nonsense.
You're not listening.
You're just making nonsense.
I'm a white woman. I don't count.
I would like to. Can I say something?
Oh, I'm listening to you because you're rude.
Is he break?
Hello?
Everything's breaking up just a little bit.
Yeah, you just made some waves in the universe.
Can I address it for 1 second from a law enforcement perspective, please?
Let's hear it.
Okay, Katie stated that she tweeted Mr. Floyd's criminal record. It bothers me every time a black man is shot or gunned down in the street that someone tweets his criminal record. Let me explain to you from a law enforcement perspective. If that man had just robbed that store and shot up that grocery store, it doesn't matter what he had done, the crime he had just committed, or what his background was. When those officers had him in custody, and Kelly agreed with me on this, I'm not speaking for her, but I'm pretty sure she will. When those officers had him in custody, it's over with. Once he's in custody, we have something in law enforcement we call in your custody, in your care. Once that man is in handcuffs, that person is your responsibility. It's their job to first provide first aid to that person if they need it. It's no way you can explain. I don't care. Let's not even go with the crime that was committed. Let's go with the facts that were presented at the time. He took his knee, he placed it on the neck of that man's neck, and he died from asphyxiation. He was dead 4 minutes before that officer got up. He even readjusted his knee to make sure he was comfortable. When that man was begging for his life, I can't breathe. And that grown man begged for his mother, because he knew he was dying. So let's not get away from the narrative. It has nothing to do with his criminal history. It has nothing to do with the crime he had just committed. As a law enforcement officer, you cannot think that way. You're not the judge. You're not the court.
I'm not suggesting that. Tell me then, why do Al Jazeera say he's a gentle giant and a family man? Why is that okay?
I'll let you speak. Let me finish speaking. I'm speaking from a law enforcement perspective. Do not do that because we're getting away from the crime that's committed by that officer. It doesn't matter his criminal history. What difference does it make what he did in the past? The man could have changed his life around.
I got that. I got your point. But my question to you is, why then do Al Jazeera and others make him gentle giant, family man? Why is that relevant? I'm agreeing with you that no one should be killed when they're in police custody. There is no disagreement there. I still think his criminal record is actually part of his life. It's relevant. I did it partly to stop people sending me George Floyd porn, because what you're trying to buy into is the idea that he's a gentle giant. He wasn't a gentle giant. That's a lie.
Yeah, I don't think that way. I don't care what his history was. I don't care if he's a gentle giant. I don't care if he was a criminal. I can't think that way as a police officer. You can't think that way. And
I'm not asking you to.
Okay, I just want to clarify, because someone can misconstrue what you're saying by you tweeting out his history. Oh, he deserved to die. I'm just clarifying.
Yeah, none of us is saying that. Okay. None of us is saying that.
I said that from the very beginning, that we all agree that he should not have died in custody.
Thanks, Chandler.
Janelle.
Yeah, thank you, Shamika. So I, with all due respect, I feel like the conversation is going in the direction that I've sat in so many conversations just like this. For the past 10 years, I've worked in politics. I've worked as a Republican on the grassroots level. I've had plenty of meetings and conversations on both sides of the aisle with Republicans and with Democrats that are both Black. And my challenge right now is that we're once again having an hour-long conversation about who's right, who's wrong, how we see things from our perspectives. But what about talking about an actual agenda? What my issue with the whole the Breakfast Club with Joe Biden and the whole liberal thing was that it was the whole entire discussion. It was 18 minutes of him talking about what he did a long time ago. Just like how I feel like this is an hour of us talking about what happened so long time ago, or things that we can't change. I think Kellyanne said it the best in the very beginning when she talked about following the money. At some point, we're going to have to make a decision to put together a strategy that allows us to actually track it back to the source and stop knocking off fruit and actually start ripping up the root of all of this. And the root of it is not the emotional side of it. We all have our own emotional pains. We have our own personal experiences. And that is definitely to keep in mind and make sure we know that that's part of this. But most importantly, at this point in time, I think we need to look at what is going to be the actual outcome after we do the protesting, after we have all of these discussions and all of these panels and all of this stuff. What are we actually going to do? I think we need to start with diversifying more so than anything else. Now, here's the thing. Most of these African-American ran communities are ran by African-Americans. Most of these, the school systems are Black school board members. The sheriff department is a Black sheriff, Black police officers. Here in Atlanta, Georgia, there's a lot of Black leaders. I mean, I sat on a call, another hour-long call with Black leaders here representing one of our counties, and it amounted to absolutely nothing. So at some point, we need to take responsibility as a people of leadership that have platforms of actually presenting some form of a real agenda, that this is what we can do. These are action items that we can implement starting right now that would change things. I'm tired of people talking about what we're going to do later or what we should do or what we could do. That is a waste of time. And what we're going to continue to do is seeing this happen over and over and over again. So when people say they're tired, I think they're saying they're tired of just seeing all of this happening and people dying in the streets. But what I'm tired of is I'm tired of the discussions. I'm ready to see something happen that's actually going to produce change. And let's not forget that when if it wasn't for Dr. King and his agenda, if it wasn't for Malcolm X, if it wasn't for Bob Brown, which most people don't talk about, that worked in the Nixon administration, if it wasn't for these African Americans who put forth real agendas and produced real results, we'll still be drinking from separate water fountains. So I really think that at some point we have to step aside from our personal feelings, our emotions, and actually put forth actual change.
Can I cut in?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry. No, it's
I'm
fine.
gonna let you say something. Give me 1 minute. I agree with you, Janelle, that we do have to come to a solution. However, I would like to point out that that was the purpose of this discussion, was to talk about race, rioting, and police brutality. So, of course, we're going to have some emotions. Of course, we're going to have, the heated exchange is fine as long as, we're not calling each other out of, our names. We're not saying, drop your address so I can come back. We're not doing any of that. I want to check on Tyrus. You are giving me Nene Leakes reunion vibes right now. So
I don't understand that reference.
You're still with us, Tyrus.
I love Chandler.
No, I'm not. I'm sorry. One of my fish swallowed a fish he shouldn't have swallowed.
Oh, geez.
No.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
There's violence everywhere. Violence everywhere.
Yeah.
Corey cat just got swallowed by a fish. So, but,
Wait, I'm sorry.
like I said, it's emotional, and it is what it is, and we all have our personal opinions, and some of it's a little closer to others. So I get it in the spirit of debate, but there's no hard feelings on my end. I'm not tripping.
Great, because I'm going to say, I think I will always discriminate or feel some kind of way about women in pajama pants and bonnets out, regardless of the color. Like,
No lies.
a certain way.
You tell no lies. Is it okay if I jump in here just
Go ahead, Kelly, and then Chandler.
I'm hearing a lot of stuff, and like I am with Tyrus, I am with Sergeant Brown, I am with Brandon, I am with Katie. Here's what we all need to take collectively out of this conversation today. You know who's going to fix this? Who's really going to fix this? It's not going to be the system that created it. It's not going to be the system that left communities impoverished, desperate, and resulting to crime, and people having to pay for sins of the past that had nothing to do with them. It's not going to be, it's going to be those two entities. It's going to be the police, and it's going to be our minority communities, because everybody else that has been using them is now trying to come in with other solutions that make no sense for either one of these places. It's going to have to be our police that say this is a taxpayer paid building. For the Tyruses of the world who have had experiences, they need to be able to come in, and they need to report it, and they need to do it. They need to call someone they know that has been a cop or that is in police work and say, why did this happen? I had this happen last night. I had a friend of mine send me a text message of a video that they saw in New York City and said, how can this even be going on? And I'm like, it took me 2 minutes to respond to that text. And I said, well, this is why the cop did it, right? This is why they did it. And my friend said, oh, okay, well, yeah, well, now that makes sense. Now I'm not so mad about it. When one of your kids has a problem in school, you go into that taxpayer building and you speak to the teacher. That's what you do. You know, with our police, right? And it's going to have to be those two places that fix it. And I'll tell you who else it's going to have to be. The bureaucrats need to stay out of it. Going to have to be some of these private companies. I have worked with employers all over the country, and this identity politics is just in every aspect of their organization. You know, I don't mean to call out Nike here, but make a little joke. They gave their soul to the Colin Kaepernick issue, right? To the Black Lives Matter issue, right? Did Nike show up in the East Zone of Kansas City with jobs for people, you know, helping to, you know, lift some folks out of poverty in that community?
Great point.
They didn't. Of course they didn't. Where was Nike? Where were their executives? You cannot tell me the executives in that boardroom that decided to pluck this issue and target our police with it did not know the reaction it was going to cause and did not know the data about unarmed Black police deaths. They knew it. They knew that this emotion would spread, and our infrastructure for information is instantaneous right now. They knew it. And then what did they do? They did absolutely nothing for that community that they used. And they helped to break down this relationship between our police and our Black communities. Well, guess what? They made them both heightened to each other. Why don't they show up, build some buildings in there? You know, Trump, kudos to him, right? He's making the first step here. He really is, by tax breaks for opportunity zones. But private sectors in this country, we have this amazing ability to innovate without the government completely. I mean, they're almost getting there, right? But without just completely, you know, running us over with regulation. Why can't we innovate? Why isn't Nike helping us innovate, right? They can sure run their mouth and help to divide us. But why aren't they coming into the communities to do this? They don't build their stores in those communities. They're not on the south side of Chicago putting up their Nike stores. No, they want those two places to get together, you know, so until the police come together, right? And we have communities of color come together and they realize who's really screwing them. And they go to Nike headquarters and say, what are you doing using us, making us mad at each other? They go to the New York City mayor's front door and say, $900 million was given to you to fix our inner city schools. And you don't have a single receipt. And you didn't give us any of it to fix our public school system. But you have no problem getting on TV, making us hate our neighbor, and making us heightened and making us aggressive towards one another. Those two, that's when it's going to change, is when those two folks come together. And
got it, Kelly.
Really, you know what I mean?
I was doing this, and I'm like, well, she didn't.
I'm going, oh, okay.
Got it.
I'm preaching. Katie was feeling me.
Y'all are going to have to exchange numbers or something.
Right.
So I was actually going to respond to Janelle's point, talking about how the riots aren't really accomplishing anything. And I'd like to hit more on that because I think that's what a lot of the people that are watching today are here to see, because the riots is all that what the media has been showing us. And I actually want to thank Katie for telling me that, you know, we shouldn't all be casting it on the media. The media is the media. That's exactly what we can expect from them. And I completely agree about that. We need to cast this more on the elected officials who we let sit in Congress, sit in our local state houses for years upon years, practically their entire careers, doing absolutely nothing to change the system of which they're willing to go on CNN, MSNBC, and even sometimes Fox and parade about how it's time for change. But then all they ever want to talk about is how we need to provide funding to Planned Parenthood. And and to usher in the Green New Deal to save America. If they actually cared about Black lives and actually fixing this nation, they would do something to address the issue with police that we've all spoken about, and how even though it's a diminishing issue, it's about time we clock the final blow and get rid of this issue completely so that we don't need to have people running into stores and stealing whatever all across this nation. And Atlanta and DC and New York, all the way in Los Angeles, I mean, they're still doing it to this day. I bet there are people outside right now throwing rocks and windows and spray painting on buildings, Black Lives Matter. And then I'd also like to address the point that it's Antifa infiltrating these riots. I mean, it's great that they're finally being declared a terrorist organization, but they're being able to infiltrate these protests that they originally are and convert them into riots and make them something that they are completely not. There's this video of this woman, and she was lambasting these two Antifa operatives who were spray painting on this Starbucks, Black Lives Matter, and then something else about capitalism, I believe. And she was like, this is not our movement. This is not what we stand for. You need to stop right now because you doing this is making us look bad. They're not going to put your face on TV. They're going to put our face on TV. Yeah. And it's going to negate this whole thing we've been protesting for, because every single time an Antifa person gets into a riot, or gets into a protest, it turns into a riot. And there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, placing bricks at places and then them busing people in to get this whole riot thing started. And now they're planning to go into suburbs all over the nation. And it's just this whole issue of violence. We're not getting anywhere with any of it. So if you really want to fix the problem, and if you actually care about Black lives, then you should vote for what you need to see in your community rather than what you think being Black voting for means, or what you think saving the nation or being a savior for Black people really means. Don't vote for the same people who have been in there for many, many years, many decades, their entire careers, at changing absolutely nothing. Vote for change, not for the same thing.
Are there people that benefit from discord between Blacks and whites?
Oh, most definitely.
I mean, Booker T. Washington talked about that back at the turn of the century, about the people that, you know, want to continue to keep grievances before the Black community, because all it does is elevate their posture. It keeps them in a sense of relevance. I mean, you look at the Al Sharptons, the Jesse Jacksons, and what have you. Those are those rabble rousers. Those are those race hustlers. And so they will see this as Rahm Emanuel said, never let a good crisis go to waste. And so it does come to the fact that we have to start looking at true leadership that really wants to solve this issue and not continue to perpetuate it for their own self-aggrandizement and their own elevated status. And I think that is what hurts us so very much in the American Black community. Look, I served in the Congressional Black Caucus when I was there, and there were more people in the Congressional Black Caucus worried about themselves and worried about, you know, having, you know, fancy little lunches and things of that nature than really looking at their communities and saying, why do the schools suck? Why are the families destroyed? Why are the gangs running rampant? Why we don't have the small business entrepreneurship? Why are the historical Black colleges and universities failing? Why don't we get more young people in these communities to grow up and become police officers and come back into their communities? That's really community policing.
Yeah,
right. And so that's why I was so, I mean, when my brother came back as a police officer into our community, they knew him and they trusted him. And he knew the people on the street. So those are the type of solutions that we should be looking at. But too often, folks want to just, you know, be concerned about their own position.
Brandon?
Well, thanks, Shamika. One thing I guess that bothers me a little bit when we talk about solutions is that I don't really hear anybody, and I don't just mean in this panel, I mean throughout the world, I don't hear anybody really acknowledging that we don't all agree on what the problem is. What I keep sort of hearing is Black people are the victims of brutality, Black people are the victims of this, Black people are the victims of that, and that some of us just don't get it. And that it's not until the rest of us get it that we can begin to find solutions. And I understand it can be irritating at times when we bring up data and statistics and things like that. But I think what I want to know is, where is the culpability within minority groups? And I'll even call out my own right now. I mean, I'm not changing the subject, but, you know, the LGBT community, historically, there's been a lot of discrimination. But I look now today at where my community is, and I see that victimhood is power. My community is using the narrative of victimhood to have absolute control and power over people in so many different ways. And, you know, gay men still today are not allowed to donate blood because in my community, community, there's an astronomically accelerated rate of people contracting HIV. I don't have HIV, but I accept the fact that I can't give blood because my community is out there spreading it way faster and way more than anybody else. So that is a burden that someone like me, now that's a small example. I understand giving blood, who cares? But I'm saying, where is the culpability? Because I don't hear that many people in the Black community saying, we've got problems in this community. And it's not just white people that need to change or fix this or that so that we can come to a solution. I can come to the table if both sides are coming to the table and saying, we've got problems we got to fix in our community. We've got problems we got to fix in our community. Let's do this together. But I'm not hearing that, I don't feel like.
I agree. That was going to be my next question. Like, where do we meet? As far as, we have you asking the question of saying, I see it this way. And then we've had, maybe Sergeant Brown or Tyra saying, no, we are profile. I see it this way. Where do we begin to meet so that we can actually move forward?
Important question.
You start by calling people, right? Like, I tell everybody, call me, grab my cell phone. If something that happened with the police officer doesn't make sense to you and you feel pain, I need you to come talk to me about it, right? Just like I would do in any business interaction. I would say, come and talk to me. Hey, anybody on this panel can have my cell phone number if they've had a question about something, but you can't just do it with the me's of the world. You got to do it. Sergeant Brown, it has to get on a pulpit in his community and say, I'm here for that too, right? And I'm sure that he does all the time. You guys kind of stop this perception, and we've got to have more Black leaders coming out to do it as well. And, the private companies to say what's really needed here is some of this opportunity,
And some of it is we need to help our police department. We need to, one thing, we got into, I talked about the 5 bad experiences, but I said, again, I had been pulled over like 27 times in my life. Most of them were positive. I friends who are outraged about what happened. I think you can be both, but it takes the vetting and the process that it is to become a police officer is tough. But once they're in there, are they still getting the training and the support? Because people get burnt out. And not just that, someone's on day 6 of a 20-hour shift each day, working overtime or whatever, personal life's gone to hell, he's having a bad day, and there's no support. What are we doing for the police officers who are in these neighborhoods or in these cities to keep the training going? Because the more you're being trained, the more your mind, you to work things out. Like, it's one thing to become a police officer, but what are we doing to keep good cops staying good cops and not succumbing to human beings' experiences? If you go through enough things negatively, you're going to have a negative aspect on things. And a lot of it, we do have to look at our community. We do have to look at the mistakes in our communities. It's a little different. It's a little harder with the African community because we're not the African American community, because we're not necessarily as connected as everyone thinks we are. It's nice to say the Black vote. It's nice to say the Black community, but we're really not as connected as people think we are. We're not all from Ireland. We're not all from, we're not all from a specific group. We are spread out, and we have different customs and cultures and different experiences, and even literally the shades of our skin divide us. Like, we're a very vexed group in terms of unity. And there's always that stigmatism. All you want to do is get out and get away from you. Once you make money, you want to get away from the hood, and you want to get away from your community because they'll try to take it from you. So there's a lot of negative stereotypes in our own community that we need to work out. So when I originally started talking about this, I wouldn't discuss race. I was discussing the problem. We need good cops to be able to be good cops. We need to support them and we need to give them the tools to help each other when they see somebody's burnt out or having a hard time or is hopeless, because they're human beings too.
Yes,
I think definitely.
Absolutely.
I'll address as far as the police department, as far as the recruiting process. But real quick, what Tyrus just stated and what Shannon stated earlier about, there's a lot of divisiveness inside of the minority community or Black community in particular, because if you go back to slavery, I don't know if you guys ever heard of Willie Lynch. Willie Lynch was a slave master that was recruited by Virginia slave owners in order how to control their slaves. He was from the West Indies. And he came in and he told them, he said, look, I smell the stench of a dead slave about 2 miles up. What you're doing is this: if you're hanging your slaves, it's costing you money because that's your livestock. That's your way of making income. But if you implement these ways, you'll be able to control them 400 years even after they're free. So what you do is this: you rape their women, you dilute the blood, you turn the light-skinned slave against the black-skinned slave. You put the light-skinned slave in the house and you put the dark-skinned slave in the field. So look, that person got it good. I'm in the field all day, well, he's in the house with massa, right? You turn the old against the young. You take the man and you beat him in front of his wife and his family. So the emphasis would be on when a mother raises a child, she's raising to be strong and not mentally strong. So light skin versus dark skin, with articulate versus non-articulate, which Chandler talked about. So we still have a lot of those things that systemically that's been embedded in us. From the beginning of this, 1619, the first slave came to Jamestown. So we have to be conscious of that and try to break that cycle. But that's another story. But as far as the recruiting process for our law enforcement, I can tell you for a fact that when we have applicants come in, we recruit from we call the 90% percentile, which is the highest level of qualified candidates. A lot of these candidates are dropped out from credit. It could be a marijuana charge or something like that on their record. Something minute might kick that qualified candidate out. So now you're going to the 60 to 70% percentile. So when you're getting these people in, and trust and believe, I worked at the academy for 7 to 8 years. When you get these people in, and I'm running them through a use of force scenario, and I'm teaching them ethics, I'm teaching them moral training, I'm teaching them handcuffing, I'm teaching use of force, and I'm going to myself, I'm writing evaluations going, nah, I don't think this person should be qualified to be a police officer. But the political side of it is we need numbers, we need manpower. So look, take that and get rid of that. So now you implement this officer into the street to police. What do you think is going to happen when you put him out in the community? What do you think is going to happen? And then, oh, we're surprised that something goes wrong, or he puts in the back of someone's neck for 9 minutes and he dies, and this officer had 18 infractions. That's the problem itself, is the system itself is built wrong. And I don't know the answer to that. I'm just a sergeant. But I have these conversations on my level with my superiors as well with my colleagues on the department. But it needs to start at the top. And I'm saying the politicians. That's where we need to start with the issues. And take this, citizens, take this to your mayors, take this to your sheriffs, take this to your city councilmen, your commissioners, your police chiefs. Take these issues and start knocking their doors down instead of complaining about something, if that makes sense.
Yep.
I think if I could just add this a little bit to it, Shamika, excuse me. If I could just add this part, I think what Tyra said and what Sergeant Brown said is combined is the actual answer, right? So when Tyra's brought up the differences and as well as Sergeant Brown about the differences in the Black community, we have to be okay with allowing Black people to have different perspectives and to have different strategies. I think sometimes we want all Black people to operate under the same strategy and to do everything exactly the same way. I may not be the one that's going to go out and protest, but I'm definitely the one who will call my governor. I may not be the one that's going to, put everything up on social media, but I'm definitely going to sit with my senators and make sure they know that this is where we stand and this is what we need. And I can help influence policy. So I do think that we do need to make sure that we open up, as far as the Black community, we open up the discussion to have differences of thought, to welcome it and to respect different strategies. And then to Sergeant Brown's point, everything he just said about acknowledging the process in picking our police officers, like fixing that's something that we should definitely be pushing for. The next time we protest, we shouldn't be protesting for the death of a person, but we should be protesting for new policies and new changes if we're going to do any type of peaceful protesting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We need to actually be moving forward with something that'll help this country rather than just dwelling on something that has already happened.
Right. Definitely can't change the past. And so, Katie, I don't know if it's like the moderator in me or the ratchet little girl in me that wants to know how, I think I understand where you were coming from. It seemed to make you really bothered about when Tyrus brought up the issue about South Africa. I don't know if that's okay to go back to, but I wanted to hear more about that because I've heard that a lot. There are a lot of people that don't care because they do feel like South Africa was predominantly Black, and this is what it is.
Yes, and of course, it's always okay to go anywhere. I think one of the beautiful things about people like us is that we aren't here because we all want to agree. So none of us agreed to come on this conversation because we all wanted to agree. We came because we have views and we want to listen to others. So it's always okay. And I think the more we're able to go close to disagreement, strong disagreement, even shouty, and still stay here, it makes us much more hopeful for the future. In terms of South Africa, having spent a lot of time in South Africa, living on white farms with the white farmers who are being hunted from their land by black gangs. And I speak this plainly because it is the only truth there is. And this isn't just theft, as the police want to have it down as. This is whites being systematically cleansed from the land in South Africa by gangs who torture them with blow torches, put babies in baths of hot water. I don't need to go into the hideous detail. But as a result, most whites are on the move. Many have already left, and they are being persecuted. Now, if you're Tyrus, you sit there gazing at your fish eating each other, and you say that, well, it serves them right. It serves the whites
No,
right.
I never said that. That's not true. That's not true. You may finish, but
finish. Go feed your fish, honey bun. And so that's what's
wow.
They're being hunted from their land. And Tyrus said they shouldn't ever have been there. Whites should be down to 5%. In fact, they should be down to no percent. And I can tell you, sitting here in the UK, it's actually quite different than you guys sat where you're sat. I've been arrested 4 or 5 times for articles I've written in newspapers. I've had the police at the door here because I stand up to majority Muslim grooming gangs. I am
so would you
becoming
compare
a minority in my own country. And I can tell you, Tyrus, I'm still speaking. Tyrus, I'm still speaking. I can tell you that being a white minority is very different to being a black minority, because when you're a white minority, you have 0 rights. I have 0 rights as a white minority in my country. So yes, what Tyrus said, I think, is very offensive. I think South African whites have every right to be there. They've been there since 1652. And I think Tyrus is talking exactly the sort of revenge that I see in people hiding behind Black Lives Matters. I think Tyrus needs to get over his need for revenge on white people.
I don't have a need for revenge for white people. So your characterization is based off your personal belief on, I guess, every black person you meet. You just assume because
what you said, Tyrus. What you said. What you said.
Oh, I said, I'm sorry. South Africa was apartheid on the community of the blacks in South Africa wasn't a thing. I'm sorry.
You said
same atrocities not done to the indigenous people.
You said
was Africa not colonized? How many Africans were
white
killed
people, Tyrus?
With South Africa?
You said there shouldn't be
didn't
white
happen.
people.
So Tyrus, I'm going to ask a question.
Decide.
I'm going to ask a question. Do you believe, because I feel like we're getting a little bit.
Yeah, she's trying to bait me into something. And it's really, she's intelligent, smart person, very clever. I'll give her that. But
and let me just
I don't remember saying, ask a question. Let me hear it.
We were born the same day. So she is very smart and intelligent. And that's probably why. But do you believe that it's okay what's being done because of the fact that it was a predominantly black country?
I think when you talk about the atrocities that have happened in Africa, South Africa in particular, I have had several trips to South Africa. I have seen it. When you look at the history, to complain only about one side compared to what has happened to millions and millions of Africans is ridiculous. And to compare that to what was going on in America, to me, was a cop-out. Now, I am not as informed as she is, obviously. I'm talking, honey.
Can I ask you a question?
May I finish talking?
Yes, but may I ask you one straight question?
You don't want to hear what I have to say.
I do. But may I ask you, just to get to the nub of it, should there be white people in South Africa?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's different.
One of my closest friends, you paraphrased, one of my closest friends in life is from Johannesburg.
Whoopie-doo, one of my best friends is gay. Does that make me straight?
PJ's
her husband is gay too.
His family there. Your husband's
Carry
gay.
on. Sorry, Tyrus, I'm listening.
The point is, and I went there, and I've performed there, I've gone there, I've seen it, and and I didn't care. I don't care about what color somebody is, but I don't think it's right for you to only talk about one side of it. because the apartheid and the atrocities that have been done to Africans, indigenous Africans of that country is beyond speakable.
But
so don't sit there and act like
you were justifying the diminishing percentage, though.
I was justifying that it's becoming a black country as it always should have been before it was occupied.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I got to step away to take a call from my surgeon. I got surgery coming up next Monday. So,
okay, and thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Allen West. Before you go, can you tell everyone how to find you?
Sure. You can find me at theoldschoolpatriot.com and then also westfortexas.com, as I'm running to be the chairman of the Republican Party here in Texas. So thank you all.
You got it, Colonel.
Thank you so much.
Joining us.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel West.
Peace out, man.
Thank you so much.
Good luck.
Yeah. So Chandler just said that you were justifying the diminishing population. I wanted you to speak to that, Tyrus.
I was justifying that it's okay for a country to be black. I wasn't saying I'm glad they're being killed.
Okay.
The way it was, I wasn't saying that. But this goes into the thing, and this is diversion. This goes away from the argument. This wasn't a debate about what's going on in South Africa. And to compare what's going on in the South Africa to what happened to George Floyd and to justify posting his criminal record,
revenge.
the two don't doesn't work.
Tyrus. It's about revenge. This is all about revenge, I believe.
They have a completely different history than these states, and every
you brought up South
has
Africa first, though, right?
History. No, I didn't. She did.
Brought up.
I would like to chime in for a second. Can I chime in for a second?
Please do.
Yeah, okay. I don't know anything about South Africa. I'm trying to fix the problems in this country first. So no.
What I'm saying.
Thank you. So I didn't come in here with she's.
Yeah, I got
one of the flags on the wall, not me.
Is this that I'm not an advocate for violence against anyone. I mean,
neither am I.
That's ridiculous. We're never murdering people and whatever. I mean, we all know that is morally wrong. But I'm going to relate that to the protesting that's going on right now in the cities. If I slap a person 10 times in the face and that person stands up and hits me with a left hook and knocks me unconscious, who's to blame? I've been slapping that person. Is it my job to dictate the way that person responds to me when they're hurt? So what I'm trying to say is I understand the rioting and the looting. Do I advocate for it? That's not my thing. I'm not about going and breaking in stores. Now, are there people out there that want to get some free stuff? Absolutely. You're going to always have people try to take advantage of the system. But when people are angry and people are screaming and yelling and tired of being oppressed and tired of going through crap in their life, this is the reaction you get. Colin Powell said the oldest cancer in this country is systemic racism. It was built on systemic racism. This is the after effect.
Who's oppressing them, Sarge? Who's oppressing them? Every single one of these cities burning down, where the businesses are being destroyed, where people are being dragged in the street and beaten, where our cops are being shot, are run by liberal prosecutors.
Let me answer that to you.
Mayors who have bail reform legislation that's ridiculous. They are run by liberal city council.
They're not doing enough.
They're not. That's right. That's right.
Let me address that. Now, my political views are this. I don't get into the Democrat, the Republican. I don't give a damn you got Autobot, Decepticon. I don't care. It's a problem that we all need to fix together. And we're blaming each party. This party did this party did that. The way these cities are, and you're absolutely right. Chicago, Baltimore, since the conservatives like to bring up this talking point all the time, they've been controlled by Democrats forever.
Yeah.
So blacks need to start making these people earn their votes. Just don't go out and give these people your vote because they're Democrats. I absolutely agree with you. But you have to understand this. The condition that those cities are in because of the systemic problem. Blacks were denied housing loans. Blacks were denied jobs. I mean, small business loans. That's why these cities are in the conditions that they're in. Baltimore had a geographical chart. If you live here, you're denied loans because they knew all the minorities lived in this community. But you live outside it, you would get business loans and small. So if you take a group of people and you put them in an environment where they have limited resources and they fight and destroy themselves for those resources, this is what you get. The Nazis did a research back before World War II with the Jews. What they did was they took 2 different sets of mice. They put one in a little aquarium, a set, and put another set. One set, they gave them water, they gave them food, they flourished.
Oh, this is great.
They had more mice. They took the other group, they denied them resources. They gave them limited amount of water, limited amount of food. What did they do? They tore themselves apart to fight to survive. That's exactly, you can relate that to what happened in the history of this country when it comes to impoverishment and poor people and minorities in these communities. So again, it's not a Republican thing, it's not a Democrat thing, whatever you want to call it. It's an American thing.
It's culture.
Well, I agree, but the one tagline I'd add to that is that it needs to stop being pinned on conservatives like me, because we're not allowed in those towns.
Right.
So they have no right
You should be.
to their mouths, you know?
I agree. Yeah, because, my thing is this, and I have these conversations, the black barbershop in the black neighborhood, that's the spot. You talk politics, you talk race, you get everything you need from the black barbershop. So I speak to my brothers and sisters and I tell them, look, you got to wake up. You can't be brainwashed. Let me tell you something. If you watch Fox News all day, if you're conservative, you're going to get a conservative opinion.
Hey, I love it.
MSNBC all day.
Thanks for watching.
GG show, baby. Enough said.
Yeah. Can we go to final thoughts? I'm sorry to cut you all off.
That's fine.
I like myself some OAN. Right, go ahead.
So you said
Well
you
done,
get
young man.
everything you need from a black barbershop. I had to literally bring my tongue back in.
Why is
I
that?
know that's right.
Why is that?
Ew, oh my goodness.
We have some good conversations in the black barbershops now.
You also have some really bad plans in there. I've been on the wrong end of a few of them.
Oh.
Yeah, I've had some bad.
All right, final thoughts so we can head on out of here.
Well, you know what everyone said about their wives and stuff. Maybe I should let everyone know that my wife is white. Maybe that will ease some of the tension with me and with Honey Bun. She called me Honey Bun. So first time I've ever been called a delicious treat. Thank you so much for that. I'd like to apologize to her if in any way that she felt that I insulted her. That was not my intention. And for the record, I'm not for anybody being ripped and murdered from their land. I just like to say that. But my final thought is the only way that we can fix this is everybody gets in. We can't do it. If white people are on board, nothing's going to get changed. If black people are on board, you can't get anything done in a mixing pot, which is our country, without us doing it together. And we have to support our police. We have to give them resources, give them help. And I really think there's something to be said for more trainings and being able to help officers in distress before they do lose it out on the street. So I think I covered all my bases, and I appreciate all y'all time, and we'll just go from there. Hopefully, Honey Bun accepts my apology.
How do we find you, Tyrus? And then we'll go to Honey Bun. How do we find
you? You can catch me at Planet Tyrus on Twitter and Tyrus Smash on Instagram.
Okay. Katie?
There's never, ever a need to apologize to me, but I very much like being called Honey Bun by Tyrus. I'm very excited by that. I'm very thrilled, obviously, that you have a white wife, and you should know that my husband is a black gentleman who's 6'8" and built like Sergeant Brown. He's not really, I just said it for fun.
I like the image.
So a couple of things for me. Number one, could I get, when Sergeant Brown does do a calendar, just, in tight t-shirts, can I sign up for that as well? I don't want to objectify Sergeant Brown, but I think it's important that I come clean. Chandler, I need to adopt you immediately. You're now my son. I need you to know that, and you're going to have to live with me at all times. Shamika, you're an absolute darling, and I love you. And to moderate this panel was the job from hell. Next time you see Brandon, give him a slap for giving you that job. But thank you, and Kellyanne, a brilliant job by you. I love it, and yes, much love from me. So I wanted to thank the panel, thank anybody who's happened to listen to us, and maybe my plea always is never let's go into a room or a conversation hoping that we will agree. That is never the precursor to debate. We are, loosely or whatever wise, all on the same team because we all want the best for our families. We want the best for each other. We want the best for our countries and the best for America. So thank you very much from me, Katie Hopkins. If you really want to find me, and you'd be desperate if you wanted to hear any more from me, but if you're desperate, at KT Hopkins, capital K, capital T Hopkins, and much more outrage on there.
Thank you, Janelle.
Yeah, thank you again, everyone, for being a part of this. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Shamika, and the entire panel. This has been a lot of fun. My final thoughts is that I really, really want to take emotional maturity and make that the biggest talking point. I think we need to have more conversations like Katie and Tyrus. I think it's good to go there and go and hit those sore spots and make sure that we are attacking it from the root. That's the biggest takeaway from all of this, is that emotional maturity is what we need to be welcome all types of strategies, because not everyone is moving in the same realm and not everyone has the same plan, but we're all getting to the same goal. So to be more welcoming of everyone, and and I think this was a great opportunity. Again, I want to hear more of the Katie and Tyrus back and forth, to be honest.
Oh.
Sergeant Brown, did you tell us how we can find you? Oh, Janelle,
Yes.
how do we
Yes, do tell.
Oh, sorry. Yes. So yeah, you can find me on all social media platforms. I am _Janelle K on Twitter and Instagram.
Sergeant Brown, final thoughts or how we can find you?
Yes, ma'am. You can find me on the Popeye1, like Popeye the Sailor on Instagram.
Of course.
To me, that's my nickname. He's my best friend. But yeah, I just want to say, thank you for the opportunity to, Brandon, I spoke with Melissa, and, as well as Shamika being the moderator. Before I came on, I was kind of skeptical at first. I'm not going to lie. And after speaking to Brandon, he made me feel comfortable about coming on. I told him my political views. I told him what I want to talk about. I was going to speak from the heart. And he assured me that it wasn't going to be what I was thinking. And I commend him for that. I appreciate your honesty, buddy. I really appreciate that. I just want to know, all you guys are very intelligent people. And I think as the human race, we need to have this more open dialogue, open discussion, so we can move forward. So we can get to the roots of, we're not supposed to agree. Like I tell my daughters, I don't agree with everything my daughters say. We're not supposed to agree. But my job is this. I'm not trying to change your thinking, but give you an alternative way of thinking. Just look outside of the box that you were born and raised in. To try to maybe understand, get somebody else's perspective and try to respect that. And just maybe as a human being, each one of us grow just a little bit more, if that makes sense. So I really appreciate the opportunity. I enjoyed it. Hope you guys will have me back some other time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Chandler?
Yep. So I just like to, first of all, thank you all so much for bringing me on. It's not always that some of these big political talks bring in somebody from Generation Z or somebody like myself who is under the age of 18, not even a full adult yet. I still have so much to say, so much to look forward to with my full life ahead of me. I've got a lot to live, and I've begun fighting. I started doing this when I was 14 years old, because I said my generation needs to be fought for. We need to be doing this. There's so much that could be happening, but our generation, or I should say my generation, you all no, but seriously, my generation definitely needs to be fought for, so that conservative values, or just free thinking values in general, because it's not necessarily one or zero, right or left. You can have a lot of different values from all over the political sphere. And so I believe fighting for that and fighting for non-polarization within my generation in terms of political ideologies is what's important. So that's what I've been fighting for. I want to thank you all so much for bringing me on, especially Brandon. He's been a great friend of mine, bringing me on to all these panels, speaking to you guys. Can't wait to work with him in the future. Everybody here was amazing. Sergeant Brown, Shamika, Kellyanne, Janelle, Katie, Tyrus, you all were so good, especially Lieutenant Colonel Brown. He had to leave us, but it was fantastic with all of you. I want to tell you guys where you can find me. I've been told I speak fast, so I'm going to say this slowly. On Twitter, I am Real C Crump, CRUMP, like Trump, but with a C. On Instagram, I am Chandler.Crump. You can subscribe to me on YouTube. I'm just Chandler Crump. And if you have ever dealt with social media, censorship, then there's this platform called Parler, spelled Parler. You can follow me over there. I'm at Chandler, just my name, Chandler. Make sure you follow me on all those platforms, especially YouTube. I'm making tons of videos. I'm going to stop plugging now, but thank you all so much for having me on.
Kellyanne?
Yeah, awesome. Oh my gosh. Well, first I'll say, Brandon said at the beginning we had a wish list for people, and I was thinking to myself, what was on this guy's wish list? Like some that looks like a Cabbage Patch Kid from some podunk town in Wisconsin. I have no idea, but this has humbled me in such an incredible way. I cannot believe I am on this panel. I mean, Janelle, I know your work and you are just class absolutely all of the time. And America is so lucky to have you and to have your voice out there. Shamika, I swear to God, if my dad could trade in me to have you as a daughter, he thinks you are that funny. We all enjoy following you on social media. You're so spectacular. Tyrus, there's not a family member of mine who isn't a fan of yours, and every female in my family has a crush on you. So tell your wife I'm sorry, but I had to say that. And like you more than
Hashtag honey bun.
Yeah, that's right. Hashtag honey bun to, yeah. And they're probably very good friends of you too. Brandon, I always say, I hope to see the day that the president of the United States pins the Medal of Freedom around your neck for what it is that you're doing in this country. I mean, you deserve it. There's nobody else who does. Katie, I think I started following you when you had 200 followers. Telling all my friends and family about you, going, I don't know who this chick is, but I think I'm related to her. British accent, but look, the people from my home state of Wisconsin, we drink beer like you Brits. So next time you're swinging through the states, you make sure to let me know. Sarge, you were just beyond impressive. I'd love to sit down and talk more life and more cop stuff with you. And your muscles are a force to be reckoned with. There's no doubt about that. And Chandler, I cannot articulate how amazing you are. If I can give you one piece of advice that I wish I would have listened to when I was 15 years old, I would have told myself, always go with the underdog, side with the underdog, be the guy who's for the underdog, man. You're going to go far places. You guys have just been spectacular. Thank you so very much. And the offers on the table, you call, you text, you email, absolutely anytime that you have questions or any way from Walkaway does. So
thank you, Kellyanne. And I am Shamika Michelle. If you go to shamikamichelle.com, you find me there. You can find me anywhere. I'm going to say thank you to each and every one of you and then toss it to Brandon. Tyrus, I want to say when you sit on TV and your Timberlands and your hat turned backwards, you give me hope that I can be just this regular Black girl and have a voice. So I want to say thank you for that. Katie,
As you should.
Yeah. Katie, I love you. You are my twin, my sister from another mother, and I guess father, because we don't look anything alike. But I just love you. You inspire me. And Janelle, you give me hope too. We've already had that conversation, but since we're talking about race, you married a Black man as a conservative, and it gave me some hope.
True.
Or a Republican.
Kellyanne, you are just amazing. I appreciate you. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for opening up your life to me. And Chandler, I know Katie has said that you are her son, but I have a 15-year-old daughter, and I have my eye on you for her, okay? And Sergeant, thank you for coming on. Thank you for wearing the really tight t-shirt. For those of us, that needed that little pick-me-up today, I want to Brandon probably told you to do that when he talked to you privately.
is that true?
Yeah.
Stayed out of it.
And Brandon, I love you. Thank you for using your platform for discussions like this, for allowing us to have this real honest conversation. It is so necessary. It is needed. And I just thank you for always being available for us. And thank you for the Walkaway campaign. Like, it's been amazing. It has done tremendous things in the community. And so I am going to toss it to you because I love you.
I love you too, very much. And once again, you did a terrific job. Thank you so much, Shamika. Thank you to all of the panelists today. All of you are amazing. Tyrus, it was great to get to meet you for the first time. Sergeant Brown for the first time. I love each of you, but the rest of you I've known for a little while, and I can call you on the phone later and say, great job. Thank you so much. I want to clear up a couple of things really quick. Earlier, when I said Katie Hopkins' husband is gay, I was talking about myself. I don't think that her actual husband is gay. I was talking about me.
You never know.
I know. I just don't want the media getting a hold of that moment and says, okay, so I was talking about me. The second thing I'd like to say is that I'd like to see this entire panel come back again and do a discussion about youth privilege for Chandler Crump, who has spent this entire day making us all feel very old and very bad about ourselves. I think that will be the next discussion that we have about being victimized by the youth of America. The very last thing that I would like
abuse.
Yes, see? You did it again.
Brandon,
what?
I'm so sorry. Before you close us out, can I give a shout out about my shirt?
Yes.
Since Juneteenth, 1865, and I just wanted to put that out there. My shirt.
Is that for sale on your website?
No, it's actually, you have to go to richish.com. You can find it there. And I want to say hello to Kat. I was told we had a skeptic watching us today. And so I want to say hello to her as well.
Sure, we had more than one.
I'm sure.
I guess the last thing that I'd like to say, just in terms of my final thoughts, is that the one thing that I think we can all agree on is that what's happening in this country is not okay. I think we're all better than this. I think that I think it's breaking everybody's heart, regardless of your age, your skin color, your background. This is something that's making us all feel terrible. And I believe personally that we're not really going to see any real change in this country until we can all come to the table together a little less defensive and a little less feeling like we're being accused or attacked. You know, it's somebody told me once, when your hands are like this all the time, you cannot receive. So your hands have to be open in order for you to be able to receive, and you cannot receive when you're in a defensive position. So I think we need to open our hands, open our hearts, and be willing to receive a little bit. And I'm not a terribly religious guy, but I was raised Catholic, and there's a Bible verse that I absolutely love, which is that it is better to seek to understand than to be understood. And I think that we could all benefit a lot more from trying to just understand other people more than being understood ourselves. And I think that's how we'll begin to see real change.
Most definitely.
We all could preach, me included. Yeah. All of us.
Open minds too. That's how we get to the future.
Thank you. Thank you again to everyone for joining. We appreciate it. Go to walkawaycampaign.com. Is that correct, Brandon?
That's correct.
Okay. And get involved. We need you.
Yes.
We have a big election coming up in November, and we need all hands on deck.
That's right. Thank you so much, Shamika.